Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Weber. I'm a Drupal developer, software engineer for Nerdery. We're based out in Chicago, Minneapolis, and also Phoenix. I've given this talk at MidCamp a few times. I love giving this talk. It's about your development tools, maximum PhpStorm. So this talk, I've cut all the way down to be a half hour, but I was not confident that I could give it in a half an hour. There were a couple of other slides introducing myself that I cut out. So let me just add those verbally here. I love development tools. I love eking out the last bit of extra performance you can get out of learning the development tools. And for my development journey, I kind of went through levels, kind of like these levels of learning and leveling up my skills because of the development tools. I started out as a .NET developer, learned Visual Studio, was able to start a company with a buddy of mine making websites with ASP.NET, and all because I had this fixation, this fascination with learning how to make sites like I was in no man's land. I didn't have a debugger, couldn't use the same things I was used to. And then I found development tools like PhpStorm that were able to give me back the things that I felt were my superpower. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited about giving this talk. If there are people out there that have untapped potential because they want to use the tools that are available to maximize their skill, then it's about time somebody reached out and helped and tried to show all the things that could be things that you can add to your normal development daily life that could maximize your skill in solving problems. So as you can see, these are the main 4 pillars of the talk, things that we were going to talk into, things that could help your ability to discover things about your code, things that can reduce the amount of time it takes to do a task, time and frustration savers, things that can expand your ability to learn about your code, digital detective skills, finding answers. And then finally, and I feel most importantly, making sure that you don't have to adapt to the tool, making sure the tool adapts to you. Okay. Before I really begin, I want to be triply sure that everybody in here knows that if you've got a question, if you want a further clarification, if you've got something you want to add to the conversation, feel free to unmute, to type into the group chat, to raise your hand, do whatever you need to do in order to get my attention, and add that right then and there to the talk. We'll have a lengthy question and answer at the end. If you want to wait until then, that's totally fine too, but feel free to make this an interactive talk. Thank you. All right, discovering your code. Modern IDEs like PhpStorm, like Visual Studio, are seen as heavy because they do a lot of work to index everything they can about your code. This is trying to gain an understanding of the landscape of your code and everything that's in it, so that when the time comes and you need to know something about something that's in your code, it can give that answer to you quickly. This indexing phase can be resource intensive and time intensive. And for that reason, a lot of people like using more lightweight tools like Sublime Text, like VS Code. VS Code is a very great tool, and can be providing you a lot of these same insights too. One day, JD and I will be giving a version of this talk that includes all of his knowledge about VS Code. We'll wait for that day to come. That indexing of the code can come in the form of IntelliSense. IntelliSense is this prompt that I've pointed to in this screenshot. Can everyone see the screenshot? Yeah. Okay. Well, no one said they haven't. I'll just keep going. Yep. Thank you, Walter. Um, and when the IntelliSense comes up, it usually is coming up in the context of, hey, I'm trying to type a variable here. Here are all the variables that are available to me in this method in this context. And the IDE only knew about all those things because of that indexing phase. PhpStorm specifically is well known for the shift keyboard shortcut to find anything anywhere. As you can see here, this prompt shows that you can specifically look for classes, files, what they call symbols, but really is like any method that is in any one of those files, and even things that are a part of the IDE, like the actions or specific preferences that are available that you, or like an npm action that was registered that you, so you can run your front end build process or some other kind of composer action. Everything that the IDE knows how to do available in one prompt. And if you want to specifically search for a kind of thing, like you just want to search for files or classes or methods, you can have a keyboard shortcut for that too. Please note, I'm quite fond of the fact that I've included both Mac and PC and Linux shortcuts. That's right, the shortcut's a little bit different from Mac versus Linux and PC, but if you're a PC and Linux user, then those keyboard shortcuts are the same. Every keyboard shortcut can be found within the ID, pretty much from this prompt too, if you search for keymap. And one last thing, this prompt you can toggle between the different tabs, like between all and classes to files, if you press the shift command square bracket on a Mac. And that's a common way of switching between tabs for any prompt that's in PhpStorm. Parameter hints are super great. If you've got a method and you don't know what type of variable you need for each one of the parameters, or if you're like, type the first parameter and then you forget what the rest of the other parameters are, you can use parameter hints in order to tell you what to expect. And you can do that by pressing Command or Control P. In this case, I didn't know that account was an account interface. I should have known because it was called account, but I would have known if it was, I would have really known if the variable was called account interface, but I didn't do that. And then I needed the hint, so that was helpful. Go to definition. Oh, is this actually going to work? This has only worked once. This little, oh my goodness, it works. This hasn't worked for years. But go to definition is a very common operation. Any IDE worth its salt will have go to definition. In that video that I could play for you again, probably try to narrate it this time, I wanted to find out what code is in Q, and it was able to show me that whenever that Q function was found, that it's actually calling something from the container. And that should have been a hint for me to know that I could bring in that object through injection. And then I could get to that method, that get method for that queue. And all that is adding to my knowledge of the code. You know, like if I have any function and I want to find out like where the problem really is, I can step through the tree of complexity throughout my code. I can use Command B or Control B to get to the definition of any method. And if I do that operation and it doesn't know how to find the definition of that method, then perhaps I haven't defined it. Perhaps this is something I'm just coming back to code that I wrote and I forgot, oh, the reason why my code is breaking is because I wrote this method thinking I was going to like write the definition of it later, and then I forgot to do that. Um, Either that or the IDE just doesn't know how to get to my code because perhaps it was brought in via Composer and I just haven't set up the IDE to know about that code. All things are clear signs that there's a solvable problem with the code, and adds and unmasks the confusion that I'm having about what is going wrong. Next up, well, if that works, then maybe all my videos works. Find usages. So we had go to definition where we were able to find a method and step into it. Find usages is kind of like the opposite, where if you have a method, like it looks like I've targeted this queue method, and I want to find out all the different places where that queue method is used. And then I get this prompt at the bottom that shows me that the method was used in the aggregator module. So like, so that can just add, that's another detective skill that you can add when you're trying to find out, okay, I'm getting in the log an error about a method, and that method is queue, but I don't know like all the story about what happened before that error call happened. Maybe the problem isn't actually in the queue method because queue is a part of Drupal core. You know, there's so many tests. Maybe it's going wrong, but there's a good chance it's not. So maybe my usage of the method is wrong. Maybe I'm not giving it the right parameters or something like that. And so part of the process is try to get more detailed log messages, but also where do I put the breakpoint in order to find out what the heck is going wrong? And in order to find that, all the places where you could put that breakpoint, you can use find usages in order to you know, put a breakpoint in every one of them. Or get a good call stack to give you a hint on like where you could put that breakpoint. All right, second pillar, time and frustration savers. These are all things that can get you to solving the problem faster, but also to give you a sense of confidence that you're not doing worthless stuff. You're not spinning your wheels on things that that take up your time and try to get you feeling like you're solving more problems per minute. I don't know. I don't know if anybody here solves a problem in a minute. Or solving problems faster. So I'm an Emacs user. I know that there's apparently a holy war between people who use Emacs and Vim. But when I was in college, we used Emacs, and everybody just had to learn those crazy keyboard shortcuts. Nano is great. Thank you, Roger. And so we got some crazy Emacs super users in that room, people who are using Emacs for calendars. There was like an AI psychiatrist bot that somebody wrote. That was they had that, they were able to do that. They were able to read their email with Emacs, all kinds of crazy stuff. But I started seeing very early that there are people that just never, when they really like their tool, they never want to leave that one tool. They want to use that one thing for absolutely everything. And is a little bit of wisdom to that. In PhpStorm, they figured out a way to shoehorn a terminal into that, and that I was able to get to work, not just for Macs, where the terminal it's very easy, very clean in order to get that in, but also for Windows, where the terminal that you really want to use when you're doing Drupal development is like a postfix Linux-like terminal. And so the terminal is something that has its own preferences, and you're able to tell the IDE how and which terminal you want to run. And you're able to get it working there right in the IDE. And the benefit of that is manifold. You can hard code your Git commands right there in the terminal, right there in the ID, without having to switch your context from the code, without having to go out to another program. Still, many people like to have us uh, one program for one bit of work. But in my view, having everything in one thing saves time, saves frustration, and lets you stay focused. Cleaning up code. In our almost Drupal 9 era, we're having to do a lot of this. We're having to scan our Drupal 8 modules and get it ready for Drupal 9. There's a lot that we can do. But where everything pretty much starts is the knowledge that the IDE can have about your code and pointing out different things that are wrong. We see that a lot with the different color codings that show up in the right gutter. Many IDEs do this. But if you wanted to get like a detailed report of everything that could be wrong with your code, oh, actually, this is not the report. This is like if you want the IDE to just fix it for you, you can tell it to reformat the code. When you tell PhpStorm to reformat your code, it does so based upon the rules that you set up. And if it's a Drupal project, the Drupal extension sets those rules based upon the style files, I forget, the linting files that are now included in the Drupal codebase. Oh, next up is clipboard history. So I'll say a little bit more about reformatting the code. This might be when I jump into the IDE in order to show this. Yeah. Sorry for it. I like to go off the top of my head here. There we go. So you can enable Drupal integration. And when you do so, it will set up how the IDE is supposed to work, not just with PHP, but with a Drupal specific PHP. There we go. Set it up to the doc root, tell it that it's Drupal 8. And one of the things that it will do is that it will set the Drupal style for PHP. Oh, in the editor. There we go. You could even do that manually if you were to go into the PHP and set it to Drupal styles. But it will just know about all the different ways that Drupal likes to space code. Drupal's very, I feel, famous for having 2 spaces for indentation, where a lot of other open source projects are very keen on 4. I don't think anyone's still keen on tabs. Yeah. And if you were to just write your code naturally and then use the reformat function, that will reformat your code automatically for you. So if you had you come to a code base that wasn't properly following code standards, it will take some work to get it in line, but you'll be able to get there. By the way, was everyone able to see my ID when we flipped over? That's important for later. Thank you. All right. Moving on, clipboard history. To the life of me, I have no idea why every app does not have clipboard history. It is such a useful feature. If you were to copy multiple things to the clipboard, it just won't forget the last thing you copied. It will remember them. And then if you press Shift Command V, you'll see a list of all the things that you had copied to your clipboard. You're able to tell it which one you want to paste. The number of things that it contains on the clipboard history is configurable. I think it's initially set to 7, but you can maximize that number as much as you want. I haven't had a need to get more than 7, honestly, because I'm still kind of hardwired to just, oh, I am going to have to copy that thing again. The only caveat is that if you're copying something that's not in PhpStorm, like in a web browser or something, um, the old rules still apply. It's gonna, you're gonna, the operating system will forget as soon as you copy something else. But at least in PhpStorm, when you're working with your code, you can benefit from this clipboard history. And then there are all of PhpStorm's generators. Its ability, based upon a keyboard shortcut, to just put in a whole bunch of code for you. Oh wait, that's not what this is. This is updating a doc block. So I think I deleted the video here because I had lost faith that I would ever make those videos work. But so imagine, if you will, you're writing a method inside of an object, and you add a new parameter. If you pressed Option Enter on a Mac or Alt Enter on a Windows machine, you'll get the IDE to automatically know what type of variable you've put in there, properly type that variable as a parameter to your method, and basically do some good work for you. It'll update both the method and the doc block. You'll have to add in the comment that Drupal developers would love you to add, and as a part of our code standards to add, about why that parameter exists. But the IDE can help you make sure that your doc blocks are up to date. Scratch pads. Ooh, I haven't played this video in years. I don't have faith in this one. Doesn't look like that one. Okay, so looks like now that I know that videos can possibly work, I'll try to redeem this one later. So oh wait, here it is. I used to work with somebody who would not use any tool unless it had a scratch pad. And a scratch pad is a file of code that you just want to paste something into, and in the best of all worlds would understand what kind of code you pasted into it and be able to apply the proper formatting, and then maybe if all the IntelliSense, let you know if you've typed something that is improper and incorrect. So all of the code scanning rules and the style rules applied to it, but is not actually a part of your project yet. So Git doesn't know it's there. It's not a real file. It's just in memory. And PhpStorm added that and made it one step better. A scratch pad can be found in your project in this group of scratches and consoles. And once you create a scratch pad, you always have it until you delete it. I don't know what this was for. I think it was just fiddling around with some code. But as you can see here, it understands that this scratch pad is a PHP file. It's applying all the style rules. If I open up a different project and I have this scratch pad still, I think I still have scratches from all kinds of stuff. You can rename these scratches so that if there is something important you want to find later, you can actually find it. You can even search your scratches if you want. The only weird thing is that the name for it is just that's super low effort in figuring out a naming algorithm. But I could have named these whatever I wanted when I created them. They just weren't important at the time of creation. They're only important once I paste code into it and I find out this is something that's going to work out well. So that's cool. I love scratch pads. Complying with code standards. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Drupal extension. It's a great, sensible defaults, setting up your project, making sure that you've got all the things that Drupal developers expect as far as coding standards um, and the formatting standards, which is great. But the Drupal extension also allows you to dynamically search for something in the Drupal API. You can highlight a bit of code, and then you can use this search in Drupal API method, and then it will open a web browser to api.drupal.org about that method, which I find it has been really helpful sometimes. As far as that search with Google, if it's like I'm trying to highlight a bit of code that isn't a part of the Drupal project, maybe it's a part of like Guzzle or something like that. I mean, it is super simple just to switch on over to your browser and copy and paste a method, but I don't know. I just find this nice. It's knowing that your IDE is, helping you out there. So passive scans are a part of daily life when it comes to like checking to see if your code is ready to commit. In this bit of code, I've got the tabulation wrong. The type variables tabbed once over too many. And so the IDE wants to make sure that it's super clear that it knows that I made a mistake. And that's why it puts the squiggles underneath that line. But it also, on the right, they show basically a color map of the entire file and all the places that could be problematic. The red parts are errors that I've found. And when you take your mouse and you like not even like click and drag, but if you just like hover over the different areas with colors. Eduardo, I'll get your question as soon as I finish this thought. So if you put your mouse over those colorful sections, it'll give you a little summary of the error that it found, or of the warning that it found. So you're able to quickly like filter out what things are important and what things really aren't important, or what things are your fault, or what things are just, that's the way I found it. Now, Eduardo, when it comes to enabling the passive scans, I've never really had trouble, or I never intentionally had to enable the passive scans. But I think what you're talking about here is enabling what PhpStorm calls inspections. So it has, I don't know, over 100 inspections that by default should be turned on. And if you wanted to go over 2 inspections, you just need to go into the preferences and search for the inspections. Right there under editor, they are. And this was something I was going to get into later, but I don't see why I can't get into it now. One of the things that I manually turn on is the code sniffer inspection. And I have to specifically make it work for PHP and INC files. Cool. Eduardo, if you can later tell me if you've got it working, that'd be awesome. I'm very concerned if you've got it working or not. Okay, Doug is asking, is there a Drupal profile? Oh, I see what you're talking about. You're looking at profile at the top, and it says project default. So, I mean, this is just what they call a profile is really just a collection of configuration items. They wouldn't have a Drupal specific profile unless you manually created one for yourself. It doesn't. I think what you're asking, Doug, is does PhpStorm, when it enables the Drupal extension, does it know which one of these inspections to turn on and turn off? It doesn't really go to that level because it just does it. I guess the people who make PhpStorm don't see anything wrong with just having it turn on the standard stuff for PHP development. So you do get a lot of false positives when you're like, this is an inspection that would normally run if you were using something with a different PSR, like PSR4 or something like that, or PSR2. What PSR am I thinking of? Like the code formatting PHP standard recommendation. That's what PSR stands for. But And the main thing I wanted to show here, Roger, was that if you manually enable PHP Code Sniffer, there are a lot of things that are working for you. If you've got a project that has the coder module, then you'll automatically teach your project all of Drupal's specific code sniffer rule sets. And then you can enable PHP Code Sniffer and tell it to process PHP and other files. I probably could include module here. That probably would be better. And then you tell it which coding standard to work for. That poses a problem because for whatever reason, PhpStorm typically does not allow you to pick more than one rule set. And for my projects, I not only want to apply the Drupal rule set, but I also want to apply the Drupal practice rule set. So the fix is to hack it to make it work. The way to hack it is to jump into the terminal, and then right here in the root of your project, there will be a folder called idea. This is the folder that PHP creates, and because it begins with a dot, it's supposed to be hidden. I don't hide it very well. I don't think I really want to hide it. And in that folder is the inspection profiles folder. And in there is just one file called project default. And if you look at that file, I don't know if everybody, do I need to make this text bigger? I don't know if I can. Does everyone see this? The line we care about is right here, where it defines the coding standard. And you have to manually edit this to be Drupal, comma, Drupal practice. Thanks, Doug. With no space. And if you do that, then you force it to obey what you want, being able to have more than one rule set. That and only that is what you need to do. I'm laughing because this was very frustrating for me for a very long time. But once you get that running, you can press Shift, Option, Command I to get an inspection name, and then you can just type sniff to find the code sniffer, and then you're able to tell it when it runs to run on the whole project, a custom scope, which we can talk about if you're interested, type file extensions to run it on, and the rule sets to run it on. I don't think I'd run it on that scratch. Let's have that run in the background. We'll tune in later to see what it finds. Any questions about that, everybody? Let me remind you, you can unmute and ask your question verbally if you want.
I do have a question about that.
Okay, Roger.
Is that somewhat redundant with the built-in inspections in PhpStorm?
So I like how you use the word somewhat. Because yes, it is somewhat redundant in that PhpStorm can run general inspections on your code. But if you're using a project that use pre-commit hooks or use code formatting, sniffing, linting on your PHP code through a continuous integration build process or something like that, you don't necessarily care about if it's approximately the same kind of inspection. You want to know if you're running the exact same kind of inspection, because the question you're really trying to answer is, if I commit this, am I going to break the build because of that? Or is my pull request going to be rejected because it didn't pass the linting test? That kind of thing. So you want to run exactly the same inspection.
Got it. That helps. Thank you.
Got it. All right, let's keep going. File health check. That's kind of what I just showed. If you want to run all of the inspections that PhpStorm has on one file, you can run a health check by pressing Shift, Option I, or Control Alt I, and then let's do that. So let's jump into a different file. Uh, not the composer file. I've got something else up here. Yeah, metabag. All right, Shift Command I. Doesn't even prompt me for anything. Oh, wait. Yes, Alejandro. You do need PHP and if you have Coder brought into your project via Composer, I believe it does have a dev dependency on PHP so yes, the answer to your question is yes. So I just told it to run all of the code inspections, and looks like it's either still doing what I told it to do, running the PHP code sniffer on all of Drupal, which probably was a poor decision, or just all the inspections on this one file. And it was able to tell me, hey, I found a method that doesn't have a return statement. Probably the code comment for this should declare that there is no return statement for this method. I could press F4 to go directly to this file, but I already had it open. Maybe somebody, oh, it's not. Okay, I just hit enter twice and it's not doing it. Weird. I think I may be pushing my computer to its limit. Everyone get health check? Run all the inspections on one file. Okay, moving on. Never have to leave PhpStorm again. I mentioned how my Emacs training has gotten me to have an affinity towards never leaving PhpStorm for any of my development work. And that comes true with all the Git tools that are available in PhpStorm. Ooh, Walter, you have 2019 PhpStorm. Walter, we'll get to that soon, because even if a keyboard combo doesn't work, there are ways to make it work. Git tools. So I've made this IDE basically have Git tools, which I should be able to, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to click. Okay, that's the reason this PhpStorm is completely frozen up, because of the inspection I told it to do. That was poor judgment. Luckily, I have a video, which I should make full screen. I should be able to, I don't know what you type in there, Eduardo. But in PhpStorm, there's lovely Git integration. I just did a Command T to pull the most recent changes here, and I was able to get a whole number of changes. And then I'm able to like look at each specific Git commit, see the message, see the files that have been changed. I can click on a file, then I can press Command D to see what that change is within a large context. So I can see the difference between what the code was and the code that was added. A couple of things I didn't show was that you're able to select multiple commits, and then on the right panel, you're able to see like all the files that were changed as a result of that collection of commits. If you wanted to cherry pick that collection of commits, you can do that command, but it's actually going to cherry pick each commit individually. But probably the best thing about where PhpStorm is today is that they've consolidated the window that shows up whenever you do a commit. You're able to have everything in one place here to see the files that you're committing, the place. They have a box where you can type in your commit message, and you're able to see the branch you're committing to. Another thing I didn't show is like in the bottom right-hand corner, you have this small bit of text that shows you the name of the branch that you're currently in. And right there, you can create new branches by clicking on that, just typing in, clicking on a new branch, type in the name of your branch. You're able to compare your branch with the main line or another branch. And lastly, PhpStorm kind of has Git without having Git. It has what they call local history. And it just keeps a history of every individual file, whether you've committed that change or not. And you're able to go back to a bit of time where your code was. If you're like me and you just said, well, that's an idea that didn't work, erase it all. And then you come back in the morning thinking about, like, why did I get rid of that? I was going down the right path. So you can go back to your local history and find out what the code looked like before you nuked it. Yes, PhpStorm can also run in your front-end build process. So PhpStorm has the ability to recognize whenever you've add a package.json, find all the npm commands that are in there, or if you've got grunt or gulp to drive your build process, they can recognize those files. And when you right-click those files and you tell it to see those tasks, it opens a little panel on the side where you can just double-click on the tasks that you've already crafted, and just run it right there in the terminal. And that could be really helpful sometimes because, like if you're working on a project with really smart front-end developers and they create all that stuff for you, you don't have to bug them about tweaking that or anything, or how to run it, because it just shows up and then you can run it, skipping all that need for knowledge transfer. Favorites. Are we back? We're back. Okay. So favorites are super awesome, and I discovered them really late. But just like creating bookmarks in your IDE, you can like right-click a file and say, add this to my favorites, and then it'll show up. Oh yeah, add it. There you go. And then, so you would do this if you had a bit of code that you know to be problematic, or a bit of code that is a part of your current feature that you're writing. And so you just want to, like, if I ever close this file, I don't want to have to hunt my history. I just want to be able to get it open as quickly as possible. I'm going to add it to my favorites so that I could do that. In the favorite section, it also knows about all of your breakpoints, which is super great because if you put a breakpoint down in your code, then there's a good chance that's a point of interest. And you want to be able to jump back to that, maybe to clear that breakpoint later in the future. Maybe you've fixed whatever you're trying to fix and you don't want to have to hit that breakpoint again. There are other windows that help you with that, but this is a really quick way to be a catch-all for, here are all the files that I'm caring about right now, and I just want to not have to hunt for them again. Right there they are. Digital detective work. We've talked about this a little bit, but let's talk about the real core skill of detective work, and that is debugging. Getting your debugger working with PhpStorm, at least for me, was the reason why I chose to use PhpStorm. I was trying like heck to get a debugger to work with any kind of PHP code way back when, and PhpStorm was the first place I ever got it to work. Definitely didn't get to work with Eclipse. But PhpStorm is really helpful, and there's a lot of reasons why. PhpStorm, debugging with PhpStorm is helpful because there are now, well, have been for many years, good browser extensions that allow you to go to a web page and send a cookie that is supposed to trigger your debugger to working. And what PhpStorm's documentation will tell you, that all you really need to do is get one of those browser extensions installed on your browser, and then find the phone and pick up the phone, and you're done. And in honesty, that has worked more times than not these days. In the past, that wasn't always the case, and you still get weird problems today. And that's what I want to talk about, the weird problems, the edge cases. So if this works for you, if it works exactly like this, that's great. I'm happy for you. But I remember all those times it didn't. And this is for those situations. Um, in PhpStorm, if debugging isn't working for you, the very first thing you need to do is check to see if you're working with a code base or with a virtual machine or with a Docker instance that knows that a debugger is working. So you would go to your PHP. I'm pointing at the screen. I don't know why you see that I'm pointing at the screen. You went to your PHP preferences in the preferences in the language and framework section. It should be able to list the CLI interpreters. You know, screenshot doesn't do it justice. Let's do this for real. So you just search for PHP and should be able to go down to languages and frameworks. And so this is what you typically see. This is basically the default settings. It defaults to PHP 5.6. And this setting doesn't really matter other than it informs all of PHP's generic PHP code inspections, which version of PHP to scan for. And I think I'm using 7.4. But let's be sure. So here's a list of interpreters, and it already lists one that it found. But let's find out why it thinks that exists. It exists because this is my local PHP. Ah, well, that's great. But I'm not using local PHP. I am using one from my virtual machine, and I'm using Vagrant. It discovers that I have a Vagrant instance. It actually logs into the Vagrant machine, and it finds how to connect to it and where the PHP is there. So if I click OK, it should create a new CLI interpreter, and it does not think that it has debug working, which is weird for me, because I thought it did. But this is a clear sign that you need to log into your virtual machine and to get it working. I wonder if it's in the right one. And then once you do that, it's able to tell which version of PHP it's got. Might as well set it to that, how to connect to it, and all that. So that's what this slide is about. Having to be able to tell your IDE how to communicate with your PHP, because when it's doing debug actions, then it needs to know, you need to know that you've got the debugger working.
There's just one comment. PhpStorm does not talk to the debugger talks to PhpStorm, and the people need to understand that.
Oh, that's a really good point, Randy. Thank you. Yeah, PhpStorm is really just listening for those debugging messages. So I think that's what you mean, Randy, when you say that.
Yeah, Xdebug is initiating connections to PhpStorm.
Right. The browser, when it shoots off that cookie, is basically telling Xdebug, "Hey, be vocal," and I think that makes the icon relevant. The icon relevant because it's just a phone that you pick up trying to listen to the debug messages. So, and there are other very helpful things when you're trying to figure out if your debugger is working. You can tell the IDE to break at the first line of PHP scripts. If you put a debug point down in a specific part of code and it's not navigating to that breakpoint, you should check to see if it's going to hit any breakpoint. Okay, so this is where I would normally jump into and hit a breakpoint. I got the warning from Doug that I've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to skip that for now, although I really want to do it, and make sure that I've got time for your questions. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the database console. I'll talk about it really quick because I'm a former database developer. I was looking forever for a tool that could format my queries, and PhpStorm's database console can do that. You can highlight a bit of code and have it format based upon the rules that you set up. You can have it connect to your Drupal database that you're working with in your virtual machine or Docker instance. And setting up that CLI is also setting up how it communicates to your machine or Docker instance. I work a lot with virtual machines, and so setting up that connection is one part, telling it how to connect, how to log into your machine, your Vagrant machine, and another part, once it has connected to the virtual machine, how to log into the database server. So pretty much the same way that you do it for third-party tools, you can do it here. This is, I don't know if you've been able to see it while we've been going along, but you're able to get a scan of all the tables that are in there. You can have it refresh, and you can like go to key tables like Node. If you double click on that one, you're able to see like all the content. I installed the Umami installation profile, so this is all the default content for that. And then inside the console, you can just do, you can have it have IntelliSense, so it knows about all the tables, it knows about all the columns that are in it, and then you can just tweak your query until you've got something that you can really work with. Sometimes the problems you have to solve are directly with the data, so you have to go there sometimes. All right, adapting the tool to you. Who was it that was talking about keyboard shortcuts? You can, Walter, you can tell PhpStorm to have any kind of keyboard shortcut that you want, and that's part of the key map, which you can find if you just search the preferences for key map. And in the key map, you can then search for any kind of keyboard shortcut you want, something that deals with inspections. Like I have run inspect code by name. You could just give it the standard inspect code prompt and then add your own keyboard shortcut that you want. Let's see if we could do Shift Option Command W for Walter. That's already assigned to something else, but who cares? Let's remove that one. I don't know, I never use that one. And then now, if I go to my IDE and I run that keyboard shortcut, I get the inspection prompt to come up. So that's super cool to me. That if I have a way of working, then I can have any kind of keyboard shortcut that I want. Which brings me to Key Promoter, which is the most annoyingly helpful plugin I've ever found. The most annoying one is the first one, Key Promoter. So if you want extra annoyance, you could use that one. But Key Promoter X still does the job. What it basically does is that if you do any kind of action in your IDE 3 times in a row with your mouse, then it will ask you if you want to create a keyboard shortcut for it, which is super helpful. I created, the thing I love to do is to basically use this close all to the right, just like a web browser does. And I just found myself doing that over and over again. And so I can just do that. You can also move the control panels around, and the IDE will remember where you move them to. So if you like your terminal to be super vertical, you can move that over to the right. They give you a lot more options these days. It's an old screenshot. And I'm at the end. Randy, I'm reading what you wrote now, because you wrote me a paragraph. Oh, yes.
I'd just be happy to do a BOF and get people actually working with Xdebug themselves. So,
Randy, you may not remember this, but many, many years ago, you flew out to the Twin Cities and gave me so much knowledge about debugging Drupal. And here I am giving a talk glazing over debugging Drupal and you're in the room, I feel a little bit embarrassed. But I'm very thankful for the knowledge you gave me all the way back.
The thing that I learned was about the scratch file. I didn't know that was in there. So
yeah, and probably the best asset is that they're always with you. You create a scratch file once and you have to actually get rid of it if you want to get rid of it.
The one other great thing I'd like to say about PhpStorm is if you work in multiple languages, all the JetBrains tools are exactly the same, which is just a lovely thing. So I work in Go all the time, but when I switch over to PhpStorm, everything's the same. I don't have any trouble. And of course, VS Code is also good that way, but not that good. But it's just amazing to be able to work in multiple languages and have the same expectation everywhere.
I've recently started trying my hand at using the IdeaJ or the IntelliJ IDEA, which is supposed to be like the thing that has all the things. That's super nice.
Yep.
Kyle asks, do debug breakpoints work in Twig? Elaine has offered a shortcut that I'll add in as comments or somehow to the talk here about how to get that working for Twig. Walter asks, he says that he uses Sublime for his Scratchpad, and that works out great. Yeah, I love Sublime. But switching programs is something I'm trying to avoid, as I said in this talk. So yeah, it's a keyboard shortcut for creating a Scratchpad, and that's Shift-Command-N. So it's super quick, it's super easy. It's almost as fast as switching it to a different application. And then Len also provides a link about debugging in Twig that we'll make sure is part of the talk page on MidCamp. Doug, are we about done? Doug, you're muted.
We have 2 minutes left.
All right, let's keep
we do have a hard stop at 5 past, so if people don't mind, we can go to 12:05.
Okay. Keep dropping that knowledge. I gave this talk in Phoenix a month ago. Somebody brought up the fact that you can create your own generators, and that's a part of PhpStorm. Like and a generator is something like, I just want to type GEN and then I get like a generator function, just come in. Generator. Well, he's not here to show, and I forgot to write it down, but yeah. There's a lot of power on PhpStorm that gets untapped, but on a daily basis, what I'm basically using is the keyboard shortcuts that I know, the keyboard shortcuts I can discover, because if you do an action with the mouse, keyboard key promoter will tell you what the keyboard shortcut for that mouse action was. And then there's also the report, the key map reference that you can get right from the IDE. There's, I think it's called the productivity guide. Where it's able to tell me, a keyboard promoter has its own panel to tell you all the things that, all the ways you can improve your speed by other keyboard shortcuts. Okay, Roger has a question. Roger, if there's time, could you show us what the result of the code sniffer inspection was? Yes, I think. That, or I overwrote it when I did that second one. Yeah, I think that's what happened, Roger. I did that second inspection command and then it just said it gave up on the other one. Unfortunately. It probably would have been thousands of things. Because the Drupal codebase does a good job of following its own code rules, but there are still things that are out there. And there are false positives. But one of the things that I do a lot, especially these days in the lead up to 9, is you can use an inspection to scan Drupal 8 module and find all the things that are wrong with it, and then bundle that up into a patch and contribute that back to the module. And then, you know, I haven't really changed anything other than improving the code quality, but it's still helpful. And there are command line tools to scan Drupal 8 modules to get them ready for Drupal 9. Contributing that back is super helpful right now. The more modules we have ready on Drupal 9 launch day, the better. I would like to thank everybody for adding to the comments. If you see this video recorded later, you probably don't see that text, but there were a lot of people offering a lot of helpful information. And thank you all for coming.